Hey, Dr. Hillary. We today are trying to help people who are experiencing a loss. It could be early pregnancy loss, it could be later in pregnancy. Anytime your body's experiencing a trauma, these things we're going to talk to you today about. It could be an emotional trauma, it can be a physical trauma. But if we're talking about miscarriage, it's both physical and emotional. So it's even harder to get to the root of helping a woman through it. So Hillary has some ideas.
Yeah. So,
How do you
I,
like that?
hi. So we were wanting to really have the conversation about supporting women during or after a miscarriage.
Mhm.
And just to probably start by saying that everybody's timeline is really different. And often we have expectations of healing that we should be able to move through it pretty quickly. I'd
Mhm.
say in general, women are going to be up against, if they have a miscarriage and they're sharing it with people who don't understand pregnancy loss, I think the general consensus would be like, you're going to just give it a go again. Like, try again. You can try again. Like, there's a lot of probably messages like that, where people don't mean wrong, but in any way, but like
Yeah.
the one not recognizing the process that the woman has to go through, and that process is really different for everybody. So we just want to talk about some different ways that you can help manage a trauma in your body. We're not going to talk about specifics of the medical specifics of what happens after a loss. That's kind of a different conversation, but more just what's happening inside your body and how to help release some of the
Mhm.
energy.
Well, one thing I think is that we, as somebody who's had many miscarriages, I always looked first to what did I do wrong and blame myself. And as I have walked the path with many women over these years working with fertility patients, it is the automatic go-to. So I think just talking about that is useful in that we all want to, I don't know if it's take responsibility or feel like there's a reason for this loss. And just the recognition that the majority of women who've suffered a loss of pregnancy go on to have happy, healthy babies. So just that concept, and I know it's hard to grab onto when you're suffering right now, but just that bigger perspective of this is a terrible situation you're in. But miscarriages are common. They are not abnormal. The majority of them are chromosomal. Um, and I also like the idea in my mind. This is what something that helped me, and maybe that's because I'm a little bit of this kind of thing where I like to have a goal in my life. I remember trying to figure out, okay, how long in pregnancy do I have to get before I can finally relax? And I remember just, I would it would be like an 8-week early pregnancy loss that I was suffering from, and I would be like, "Okay, I just need to get to 15 weeks. I just need to get to 15 weeks," because at that point, the risk of a miscarriage goes down dramatically. So in my mind, and Hillary always says, I'm the glass half full person, and I was completely taken out when I had a miscarriage. I was miserable, 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 and felt like this is never going to happen for me. And so, in my mind, oddly enough, the idea of, okay, I know that this happens to people and this can be okay, and I can get pregnant and have a baby, and I just have to make it to 15 weeks for me because I was having early miscarriages. That was something that I held on to in my mind, and that really did help me.
I
I'm
think that
choking over here.
there's, what do you say?
I'm like choking on a raspberry seed. Sorry.
I'm going to look this. I think that one of the things that we have to remember is that there's our mind. Our mind can be sort of our enemy after a trauma like a miscarriage, because, like Kara said, we're trying to scan and find the reason why, and it's totally normal. I mean, all of us, anybody does it. If there's something that goes off course, we're trying to figure out the reason why. I think women tend to be self-blaming more, and so there's this mind process and mind looping that can happen. And what we want to try to do is stop the mind looping and bring you into the present moment. Anybody going through a hard time, or a PTSD or a trauma, really it's the present moment that is the medicine. And we try to keep your body and mind out of this fight or flight reaction. So what can happen is the mind can loop and replay the pain. The body has a memory of the pain, and you get stuck in this post-traumatic or traumatic loop and cycle. And what we're trying to do as naturopathic doctors, and we're trying to bring balance back to your body, to calm your nervous system, so that because your stress hormones deeply impact your sex hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, you're getting pregnant hormones. And so we want to try to bring balance to your body. We want to try to disrupt or interrupt that trauma cycle that gets oh my God, I'm running from the bear up again. Mm-hmm. And that can happen even just mildly when you're traumatized, and that can, lots of things can re-traumatize a woman after a loss, right? Like just having a conversation with somebody that is maybe the person's not bad meaning, but they say something that feels inflammatory to them. Seeing a pregnant woman, being on their social media feed, right? So there's a lot of things that give that response and bring you back into the trauma. So there's a couple really good strategies, or things that connect the mind and the body in trying to do trauma release. One of them is called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. And this has been used a lot. Well, we learned about it from a guy in our school, our med school class, Fred. That was Fred. He was a military pilot and went on to become an airline pilot after that. And he trained us because when we went to medical school, it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, trauma wasn't really a buzzword. Trauma wasn't people knew that there were mental illnesses, and people knew that there were anxiety disorders, but trauma was less of a thing. And he really spoke about the override that can happen when people get traumatized, and in what they were trained in being a pilot. Right.
And I think it was maybe a military background, because PTSD was maybe first recognized by the veterans and really the work there. And interestingly enough, he was maybe in his later 50s or something like that when he came to school with us. And he was really tapped into this of, there are things you can do to rewire your nervous system yourself without going to anyone else. You can do this yourself. You can learn these techniques. And now we have all these apps, we have all this stuff, but in a way we just consume these therapies. And we have, I have probably 3 or 4 of these things on my phone. Honestly, I do. But the whole point of it is just to do one of them. And so I love this one that Hillary is going to teach us, because it is so easy. Anyone can do this, and it takes you 5 minutes. You can hide in a bathroom stall at your work. You can go to your car on a break. You can get some time of peace in your life. If you're a mother, you can hide out in the bathroom, lock the door for a second and go do this. And it takes you no time, right? It's not this meditate on a pillow for 40 minutes that is just unrealistic in our lives.
A lot of times what we're trying to do is unstick the body, move the body, and then the mind changes. So there's this mind-body connection that is really interwoven in trauma or after a loss. And so a lot of times just moving outside, I think, is probably the best thing that people can do for themselves. And that nature always kind of heals when you look outside and you see the cycles happening in life out right in front of our eyes. It can be, it can connect you to cycles of life in our own body. So being outside is always my number one go-to move. And if you can't, then like this tapping is really helpful. So there's a ton of information on EFT, emotional freedom technique. I might teach it in a different way than you see or you have been taught, and that's okay. But so there's a lot of YouTube videos on how to do this. This has been used in situations where there have been trauma. I know in like the Connecticut school shootings, there was a huge movement. We were taught in a medical school conference by somebody who came in and did EFT with those communities who had suffered a lot of trauma, and seeing success with a lot of success to help people move through that acute phase, try to calm their nervous system. So this isn't speaking to any, like, this isn't to push you through a timeline. This isn't to, it's just to help support you if you feel like you're having a physical response or a mental traumatic loop that you want to shift. So there's a point here where you want to tap, and this is called tapping, and and it's just saying a positive statement. I'm releasing trauma from my body so that I can come into a neutral space, or whatever the statement is for you. And then you start tapping, and these points are connected to meridians in the body and help to really move energy and stuck energy. And so you can find a YouTube video that goes into more detail, but you can just say, I'm releasing the trauma that my body is experiencing. You can say the same message, or you can change it. Like, I know I'm capable of healing from this difficult situation and feelings in my body. I release stored trauma, stuck energy. And then I always like to say something like, I want to feel balanced and calm in my body. And
in a miscarriage situation, something that might be nice is something like, I know that this is not my fault, and I'm going to proceed with love for my body because my body can do this. Something like that. Something that feels like you're really allowing yourself to move through it without a blame cycle. And you're also celebrating, okay, I'm going to be able to do this in the future. Some kind of hope. There is hope here, and it's hard to grasp onto. So whatever your statement is, and everyone has something different, just comes from that space of a positive thing. I know I can do this. It could be as simple as that.
That's so beautiful. And so we just want you to have a tool that you can do anytime, in your car, in your home, before bed. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel stressed, this is just something that you can do that helps. It brings a wave of calm. It helps move the trauma energy so that something new can come in. You can take a deeper breath, a bigger breath. You can feel not so traumatized in that moment when you're moving the energy.
I just, as you were talking, remembered sitting in a coffee shop. You and I often work in coffee shops with our computers in front of us, like we're college students. We pretend, but we sit there. And you had got some email or something that was stressful moment. And I look over, and all of a sudden Hillary's doing this in the coffee shop. And I'm like, what exactly are you doing? She's like, oh, I got an email. So nobody thought anything of it, but your automatic was, I recognize this is going to be this is part of a stressful pattern, whatever this email and whoever it was coming from. And so I'm just going to go right into this thing that makes me feel better. And that was such a great thing to see, just in a regular old public zone.
You just leave it to Hillary to do something like that. But who cares? And why not support myself so that I know I can. The thing about trauma or moving through a big loss, that's a mind, body, spirit loss, when you have a deep dream and it feels very stunted in that moment, and you're you're grieving many things, and your body is also going through a physical transformation. You're going through a hormonal change. See, this is the thing about pregnancy loss. It is true mind, body, spirit. There's a lot of changes happening at once, and there's a lot to do. So just doing something in the moment that helps to shift the energy just a little bit so you can get a little bit of spaciousness. And in that moment, what I gleaned from using this tool was I could say, okay, I don't need to have a response to this email right now. This thought or intrusiveness dropped into my life, even though I'm with Kara, trying to focus with Kara, something dropped into my life. It gave me an emotional response that I don't really need. It's taking me out of my present moment. So I'm trying to retrain my brain to be in the present moment. I can table that a little bit for now. I can shift the energy of that. I can be where I am right here, right now in the present moment, and then deal with this issue later. That was about my divorce. So, I could table it. When you're going through, if you see a pregnant woman right after a loss, it's hard for you to table those feelings. So just know that. And sometimes if you don't even feel like tapping because you're with somebody, you can visualize the exercise. And just visualizing, we are energy. We can move energy at any time by just visualizing ourselves moving through the energy, visualizing the exercise that helps the brain. So we want to just introduce a tool that could be available for you at any time.
And we want to reinforce that there is hope. This is one loss. It's not all a loss. This can get better. Bye.